Need Unstoppable, the Lucent Citadel Hardmode, or just want to get better at Vet mode? Here's how to heal it. Tips and info for Raidleads included. The healing here is unique compared to previous content. The execute phase of the final boss requires a lot of sustain. For this reason, many healers, myself included, are running Atronach Mundus just for this content. I know this sounds like a radical departure from the typical ritual Mundus, but sustain can be a problem for the hard mode version of this trial. It's more important that you never run out of magicka here than having the highest healing per second output. Expert Evasion is also a very useful slottable in this trial. Your buff food should include health, not just magicka. For the first trash, just be aware they apply bleeds to players, so keep the hots flowing. Assuming you're burning it correctly. More on trash mechanics later. The first boss will benefit from triple swift on jewelry, and you will need a ranged taunt skill. The fight is split 6 per side, and adds spawn around the room that the healer needs to stack in. The edges of the mirror on the wall can be used to show how far you need to travel to get the adds to stack on boss. The teleport pads can be used as the other point needed to stack the adds. This diagram shows the approximate spawn points and rubber band taunt positions you'll need to move to get the adds to stack. So to get them to stack, it looks like this. The adds you taunt spawn as invulnerable, and players who get a beam over their head need to touch them briefly to make them vulnerable, or unlock them, as I'll call it. As a healer, you'll be busy stacking them, so it's usually better to have another player with the beam unlock the adds while you're stacking to save time. You can unlock an add with your beam if they're on opposite sides and you have to travel towards one stack to stack the others anyway. I try to call out to my team if an add is going to be late in stack so they can run out to unlock. Sometimes, for the second add wave, if the adds are all spawned on one side and I have beam, I will run over and unlock them myself before pulling them in. That's because the beam will disappear shortly after the second wave. When burned correctly, the fight should flow like this. You get one set of 2 adds, they get stacked and burned. Then, a set of 3 adds spawn. If your burn is correct, the room should swap shortly after the second add set. If there are adds left over when the rooms are swapping, the tank should taunt them. The Scorpion room is the more dangerous room as you take a lot of dot damage. Keep all your hots up. The Centipede adds called Gloomy Inferniums apply a dot called Melt, so they must be killed before the dot ramps up in damage and kills you. Failure to unlock these adds will often cause a death. If your team messes up, and it does happen, go hard on healing for the players affected with Melt and hope for the best. The Skeleton room has meteors that can be roll dodged, but they don't all fall at once, so be aware that some meteors will land later than others. The Skeleton room is harsh on your stam, so it's a good idea to weave synergy grabs when you're on this side. If you're swapping into the Skeleton room, the meteors and skeletons will spawn at around the same time soon after swapping. You may need to delay pulling in the skeletons for a moment for safety, to ensure your stam isn't depleted. If you use Expert Evasion and roll dodge the meteors correctly, you can pull them in right away though. Note that when the content first released, the mechanics lined up nicely with each other and you could burn the boss into a room flip before the second wave of adds spawned. But a later update changed the timing of the fight so that you are forced to do 2 add waves before you can flip the room, and the beam mechanic and add spawn timings no longer align as well as they used to. The fight is now harder than it was on launch. You'll want DPS to assist with unlocking the add's invincibility as fast as possible. For future proofing, be aware that the timings of this fight may one day be adjusted again. I've seen the timings for beam get weird with slower burn, like for a hard mode only group. It's the bigger mini add that summons the beams for you, so if the bigger mini is alive for a while, you may have more unlock beams to work with. The big thing with trash after first boss is you need to stay aware of stacks of darkness on you. The adds apply darkness with various attacks and AoEs. It looks like this. If you have 2 stacks, you need to keep away from other players that might receive stacks, or you could bomb them when you get a 3rd stack. If you get a 3rd stack and AoE debuff, run it to a glowing crystal if there's one available to cleanse all the stacks. Don't stay in the cleanse crystal for more than a moment, it does damage to you while you're next to it. For the mid-boss Cavot, the darkness stacks from trash still apply here, so keep an eye on them. The boss does an AoE and invulnerability phase right at the start. It's like the keel cutters from Dreadsail Reef, so keep out of it until the mechanic ends. Delay your off-balance proc for after the invuln phase, if assigned one. Do the Ghostlight minigame to get your ultimate back. The second boss, Orphic Shattered Shard. My preferred setup here is triple Swift Jewelry. If assigned mirrors, add Vines and Shimmering Shield, or similar selfish skills if you're not a Warden. The mirror drain hurts. You do not need to assign a healer to do the mirrors, and you may find it safer not to. This boss has a trash pull at the start. A certain ad does an AoE line mechanic that acts like a boomerang. Damage goes out, and then damage occurs again. Don't stand in it and roll dodge if you're caught in it. When the last ad is about to die, back away from the center as the actual boss will do a knockback explosion. One healer needs to kite Zoran's jumps. Zoran is kinda like Felms from Asylum Sanctorium, except Zoran is actually a heavy attack sorc if you pay attention. I wonder if the devs meant something by this, pitting all these PvE min-maxers against a heavy attack sorc. Anyway. He channels a heavy attack and shortly after he will jump, so that's your cue to get away from the group if you're not using the Lucent Citadel Helper add-on by Wondernuts. You may need your off-tank to call out jump as soon when this heavy attack channel happens, as it might be hard to see the channel in the heat of battle. Go out towards the wall to catch his jump. When he jumps on you, roll dodge if you're not going to run away from him in time, because he will do an AoE explosion a moment after jumping that can kill you. With Swift Jewelry, it's pretty easy to just sprint out of it though. The main boss does an expanding AoE called Shockwave that can kill you. It looks like this. Either back away to avoid it when it's going to happen or roll dodge it, but make sure to roll dodge forwards towards it. It's the outer edge of the ring that does the damage. No, you can roll it, but it cannot be blocked. It can be shielded. I do find as a healer I can just outrange the giant AoE though, since I need to keep the DPS in front of me anyway. Be careful of the main boss because he does have frontal cleave. In Execute, a bunch of ads spawn that are dangerous. They spawn throughout the entire fight, but are the most dangerous in Execute. Roll dodge once while the tank taunts them all. The tanks can only get one taunt per GCD, so they will be loose for a moment. Avoid or roll the spinning attack. Your off-tank may need some healer support during this phase, usually just one synergy for resources. Barrier is useful in Execute. The cue that the Execute phase has started is when Zoran leaves the fight and a bunch of spinning ads spawn in.
The sword will finish you.
You no longer need to kite jumps after this. Shimmering Shield is useful for absorbing the channels and ranged attacks that will happen from ads that spawn throughout the encounter. Vines is useful if you're assigned to flip a mirror for the dot you get after. Barriers are extremely useful for no-deathing this fight. You'll definitely want one before the final mirror flip, as a lot of chip damage occurs in this phase along with mirror dots. Final boss, Zoran. On release, there were two main strategies we saw teams go for the marathon phase of Final Boss. One's like my team TSN and others went for, and the other used by Genesis to ensure a world's first. This is where you should grab your Raidlead and make them watch this video, because the information applies to everyone. I'll discuss the two strategies and then get back to the details on healing them. The first strat, the one TSN and others used, is a faster paced push of the marathon phase. Arguably this method is more dangerous. With this way of doing things, the knot order should flow like this. It results in two major differences from the other strategy. The first difference is you push the starting crystals hard to try and get the knot as far as possible, so the goal is to get it through as many gates as you can. Like this gate at the Grievous Twilight mini-boss, and through this gate with the 4 crystals. You'll probably get the boss tether mechanic because you're focusing crystals as the priority target. The second difference is the Necromancer ads phase. The off-tank solo pulls the whole Necro room and brings them to the top of the stairs. With this method, you're almost trying to skip the second Necro Rain phase, but it's very dangerous for the off-tank. It's safer for the group in the knot though, because they have 2 healers with them at the top of the stairs. This method requires you make your burns without fail, or it causes issues. The second strat, the Genesis style method, is probably safer and more consistent. The knot order for this method should flow something like this. The differences start with the knot being shed before gates. Rather than advancing the knot as far as possible, you take it in stages and shed prior to entering rooms that could close half the team off. Like shedding before the Grievous Twilight mini-boss room, and shedding before the 4 crystal room. The second major difference being the Necro room. A healer can accompany the off-tank, and the off-tank stacks all the Necromancers with line of sight towards the exit crystal while the group is burning an Atro at the top of the stairs. You get 2 Necro Rain phases with this method, one with the DPS team at the top of the stairs, then they run down to the stacked Necros and kill them as the second Necro Rain phase happens. So you transition between the rain phases. This is easier for the off-tank, but harder on the healers. The knot holder needs special attention from their healer with this method. There are 2 ways to do Mirror Room safely. Both are compatible with whatever method of running the knot in the marathon phase you chose. The first way, the Genesis way, makes a shape like this around the center and holds the current in a central rear position at all times, and the boss looks left into the left wall of the room. The knot stays static on the boss. This is easily the best method, but benefits from having an add-on called Elms Markers. The second way, the Limitless method of Mirror Room, uses these ridges on the wall as markers as to where to stand. The knot also stays static on boss with this method. This way is maybe more console-friendly because of the in-game landmarks being used. The boss is also held in a more typical exit-facing direction. With either mirror method, the healers are split as to what they focus. One healer focuses the group, while the other healer focuses the current holder. If you're the group healer while holding current, you stay healing the group, just trust your co-healer. Note that every group has different burn, and you may need to adjust the current order to prevent knot and current from being the same player at the same time, which will result in a death. That wraps up strategy. Now for the healing tips. The final boss Zoran uniquely starts with a long marathon phase through a Zerg of trash ads where you have to sprint with the arcane knot, that's this thing, all the way to the execute phase, aka the mirror room, where you actually fight the boss Zoran. As you reach the bottom of the stairs, roll dodge the Manticora in case it targets you. Avoid AoEs on the run-in. There are tracking AoEs to avoid, and also mine-style AoEs to avoid. When fighting the mini-boss, a tether mechanic will go out between the knot holder and the furthest player from the boss. Have one of the healers catch it and keep it away from the group. If the other players touch the tether, they get one shot. If the mini-boss is burned really fast, you can skip the tether mechanic. Give the knot extra attention in its last 10 seconds as its damage ramps up over time. Make sure to save your expert evasion proc and stam for the beam rooms where you may encounter situations that require you to triple roll dodge. You must take special care not to stack Necro Rains on the knot holder. If you're doing the Genesis style marathon strat, during the first Necro Rain, one healer is on the knot, so the holder needs focused healing. A barrier is used to cover the other players. If you're a knot holding healer during the Necro phase, be careful of the necrotic barrage AoEs that target the knot holder. I suggest pre-planning where you'll aim them with your team. I put them on the right wall so everyone knows to keep clear. And if doing a Genesis-style marathon, when you do the rundown between reigns to the stacked necromancers, run through them and stand opposite the group so that the Zerg of skeletons get caught and burned by cleave before reaching you. These skeletons are normally not an issue, but can be if combined with the knot and rain damage. The knot can be picked up from a distance away, so if it's in something dangerous, just grab it from range. In the 4 crystal room, it's a good idea to stack the mini-bosses in this cubby, as it will reduce pressure from AoE mines. A lot of groups pause in the room right before execute and let the knot shed so that you can run into the mirror room with a fresh knot timer. Make sure to block chain lightning. It chains from player to player, so you can't just tap block in unison with everyone. You have to be blocking when it chains to you. I just perm block the mechanic for safety. Leave early for your mirrors. You want to be in your mirror position before the line's warning AoE animates. Shift along your line without swinging it if you're in danger from overlapping lines. Note there's a blue circle on you and the mirror connected to you. The damage from these does not all go out at once, so don't rush back into group too early as your damage might be slower than the other lines going off. Make sure you take your tick of damage before moving. Try to make sure your hots will last for the tanks during the mirror phase. Keep pushing radiating regen and other hots during this phase. Stand away from group when it's your turn to catch current. Make sure you're the furthest from boss. Be ready for the fluctuating current to hurt more the longer you hold it. Play this mechanic defensively as you'll only have it for a short while. It needs to be off you before 15 seconds are up. Healers often start each current team, so you'll most likely pass it off early, just before a mirror phase. The goal of each player isn't to hold current for the max duration, but to pass it off at the most convenient times between mechanics. So for example, if I chart out when each player passes current, you might get something like this. If you're just going for the hard mode clear, have a DPS sacrifice themselves to the current mechanic. When they die, it disappears and goes on cooldown for a while, making the fight a lot easier. The fight is not over when the boss dies, and the Atros still remain in play. You still have to dribble the knot and dunk it in the basketball hoop. So maintain focus, keep healing, and play mechanics until it is safely dunked and the score pops. Don't lose your cool and throw just because you've defeated a heavy attack sword. Big thanks to all of TSN from Xbox, who together with me progged and researched this content on PTS and live. Shoutouts to Ickypiggy, Hooga Booga, Kozin, Antonia, and A1 Puppies for sharing their knowledge of the trial with me. I'll link their YouTubes and other good healer resources in the description if they have one.